Welcome on in to the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Johnny Gadamowitz, Ethan Frank with you as Syracuse prepares for Stony Brook. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by Stony Brook men's lax head coach, Anthony Gilardi. Coach, how's it going today? Thanks so much for taking the time.
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you. And now, you look at this week, it's a busy week for you guys. You go midweek game before hosting Syracuse on Saturday. You've had a couple of close losses to ranked opponents the last couple of games. What can you sort of say about how your team has fared against some opponents that have had numbers in front of their names over the past couple of weeks here?
Yeah, I think for us, our goal is to play really good teams and become a really good program. So you have to play those teams. And I think we've been in the games the last two games, but we haven't made enough plays at the end to get the win. So that's something we're continuing to work towards as a program, a coaching staff, and in the moment, make the plays that need to be played. But we feel like we had a good group and we like where we're headed.
What would you say is the biggest thing when preparing for a major conference team like Syracuse or some of the other teams you guys have played in recent weeks?
I think the initial reaction is to overthink it and over-prepare, right? And I think that's something I've been fortunate to coach in a lot of big games in my career is in these moments, right? You don't rise to the occasion, you fall back to your training. So it's just getting back to the fundamentals and understanding as much as we have to know the opponent. We have to execute how we want to play offensively, defensively in the ride and the clearing game. So we focus a lot on ourselves, understanding our opponent. Obviously, Syracuse is a really talented team. So we got to know their guys and have a plan for some of those guys. But it really comes down to us in the moment, making the positive plays consistently.
Coach, you guys being a Long Island school, lacrosse being, the hotbed, that Long Island being the hotbed that it is for lacrosse, you look up and down your roster. It's no surprise you've got some Long Islanders. Same can certainly be said about the women's team with Coach Spallina as well. Just sort of curious as to just how much of a leg up that sort of gives you guys, maybe from a recruiting standpoint, that you're able to, keep a lot of these high profile athletes, whether it be from a Chaminade or a St. Anthony's, kind of right at home in their backyard.
I think obviously it'd be nice if no one else came to Long Island recruited. We'd be even better, right? That's part of it. We're fortunate to have a lot of talent at our disposal, but part of it is guys, other schools coming here, guys want to go other places and leave Long Island at times. So, for us, we feel like, it's easy sometimes to just take every Long Island kid we can. So I think our staff's done an unbelievable job, Coach Brazel, Coach Channy, of making sure we're still finding the right fit. And we're trying to get out of just taking only Long Island guys and finding some of those upstate guys and some of the Canadians and things like that to have some more success. But, we're very fortunate to be able to drive 5 minutes away and see some of the best lacrosse there is.
So shifting it back to more of a micro level this week, you guys obviously have a game tomorrow. Syracuse does not have a midweek game. Would you say it's an advantage or a disadvantage for you guys having a game in the middle of the week? Maybe you're a little bit fresher, having just played. You got a lot to take away. Whereas, Syracuse is just focusing on Stony Brook all week long. Maybe they get a little complacent. Would you say it's an advantage or a disadvantage to have a midweek game for you guys?
Ask me Saturday at 5:00 and I'll tell you, right? We'll know a little bit more then. It's part of the game of lacrosse, right? There's people play midweek games. We're on spring break. So it kind of makes for, gives us the opportunity to spend more time with the guys preparing than we would during a normal week when they have classes. But I guess the best part of the game of lacrosse, right? If you want to win the national championship, you got to win one Saturday and win one Monday. So it's the ability to prepare and get your bodies right no matter what, and I think sometimes when you have a big opponent, either midweek or at the end of the week, it's just less time overthinking it, like I said earlier. And I think that we got to just line up and play and hope our best versus their best is comparable and see what happens.
Coach, you guys have demonstrated an ability to win games that are both high scoring, whether it's an 18-14 win over Robert Morris earlier in the year, or low scoring, a 10-6 win over LIU. Which of those two outcomes, in Anthony Gilardi's world, is more ideal? Like, according to your game plan and the strengths of your team, Is this the kind of team that needs to put up 15, 16 goals consistently in order to win games and shoot up the rankings? Or are you just as content and just as capable of walking away with a 10-6 win like you had over LIU a few weeks back?
I think every game is just so different, right? And there's sometimes you got to be able to win a shootout, and you got to be able to grind out a tough one when you're not maybe playing your best or shooting your best. And, I think that's where the disappointing fact was on Saturday in our loss to Brown is we knew it was going to be a sloppy game. I mean, it was pouring sideways there for the majority of it, and we couldn't grind enough good offensive possessions. And we played really good defense for the most part. So I think we have the ability to play either way. And I think like most teams, right, the shot clock has changed the game of lacrosse. Some teams, when you're feeling it and you're shooting well, it's going to be high scoring. When there used to be a time when I was like, hey, let's hold our opponents under 8. I mean, that's not overly realistic anymore in this day and age. So we got to be ready to play the hand we're dealt. And sometimes we got to be able to take the air out of the ball and rest our defense, or know that it's going to be a lower scoring game. But, if we feel like we're talented offensively, we just got to shoot the ball well, and we can be in any game. And we're very fortunate to face off X to be doing a really good job to get the ball a lot. So that helps as well.
What can you take away from last year's game against Syracuse up at the Carrier Dome and then translate it to being able to play them on your guys' home field?
I think anytime as a program, as you start playing some of the better programs in the country, the more blue blood programs, I think the first time you play them, there's always shock, right? And shock and awe. I mean, we went to the Dome last time, and even though there was really no fans in there, just going in there was the first time any of these guys have played a game in there. For me personally, it's the first time I've coached in there, so I understand that feeling of walking in there and being like, oh man, we're playing Syracuse, and that definitely holds a lot of weight. So I think that playing them a second time should give us a little bit more understanding of what to expect. We scrimmage really good teams for that reason too. You want to be a big time program, you got to play those teams and compete and win. So I think playing that game definitely gives us the understanding of, hey, I think we took 50 something shots in that game. The goalie played really well. We hit him a bunch, and we just couldn't stop him enough in that one stretch at the end of the second and the third. So I think that gives us some confidence that if we play well, they're just like us.
What makes Syracuse so tough? Obviously, it's an Orange team that is not up to par with what, Orange fans have come to expect the past couple of years. But, in game planning for the matchup this weekend, what about Gary Gates' squad makes them such a unique challenge?
I mean, you look at the sideline, they have some of the best coaches in the country, right? I think it starts there. Coach Gate, Coach Petro, Pat March doing a good job. Offensively, they're extremely talented, two of the best offensive players in the country. I think sometimes it gets lost that they, two of their losses are against two of the top teams in the country. So yeah, maybe they're not the number 1 or number 2 team in the country right now, but they have the talent, the coaching, the pedigree to get there. So I think for us, it's just focusing on what they do really well and how we can kind of game plan around it. And then us making sure we're ready, fresh, mentally and physically to play really well Stony Brook lacrosse, right? And if it's going to be a game, we're going to make sure we're playing well and doing things to take away some of their strengths.
You look at the past few games for Syracuse. I mean, a loss to Army, they escape Hobart with a narrow victory, and then obviously a loss to Hopkins this past weekend. I know it's still Syracuse, and you just mentioned their strengths, but I got to ask, Coach, is there any part of you that's sort of licking your chops a little bit, considering where they are at right now? Perhaps, I don't want to say reeling a bit, but a disappointing start, I think it's fair to say. How much does that factor into you kind of being excited to get them at this point in time?
I mean, I think they got a really good team. I think they're in every game. I feel like that's kind of gets lost sometimes as coaches. We know we get evaluated on wins and losses, but you got a team that's a really talented group that's winning a lot of faceoffs, taking a lot of shots, and can score at will. So I don't think any part of me is excited about that. So I think for us, again, we know how talented they are. Seen it up close and personal last year, and again, when you look at the teams they've played, and they've played really good teams. It's not like they're losing to teams that have no wins. So I think they're a talented group, and we got our hands full.
So shifting back to focusing on Stony Brook, tomorrow you guys start conference play. What do you think the biggest difference is in, a conference game versus a non-conference game? Is it a mental, maybe things are a little bit more chippy? What are things like? How do you prepare differently, and how do you set your guys up for success in conference versus in the non-conference?
I think typically conference games, right? Coaches know each other more. You've played each other a ton. Obviously this is our third year as a coaching staff here, only our second time playing any America East team. So, we don't really have a great feel for all the coaches and the players yet, only playing them once. Obviously this being our last year in the America East, I think makes it chippy no matter what for both teams, for sure. So this is the last conference shot we have at every one of these guys, and the same for them. So I think just preparing normally, but understanding that in the end of the day, when you win or lose a conference game, your record is 1-0 or 0-1 in conference, right? And that means a lot, so that's a big one for us. And this is like we've talked about already, this is our first game in the America East Conference. So we got to make sure we're ready and go out the right way.
Coach, you look at the stats for you guys. I mean, from a goal scoring standpoint, I think it's fair to say things have been pretty widespread. You have Palinetti, Anderson, McCannell all up there in the mid-teens. Is that a formula that breeds success for you guys, where you kind of have, every time you bring the ball up the field, it's a pick your poison sort of approach for the opposing defense and who gets the short stick and things like that? Or in a perfect world, does that sort of alpha go-to type player emerge as you hit the dog days of the season here?
I think for us, we talk about offensively doing 1/6, right? We talk about everyone doing their job and knowing their role. And, in the ideal world, we have 10 guys scoring a goal, and I think that's just so much harder to defend. And Dylan does a really good job and gets a lot of publicity and credit. And he deserves all that, but he'll be the first to tell. All he does is take advantage of his opportunities that are generated for him, So I think for us, it's way tougher to stop when there's 5 guys, 6 guys out there on the field every time that can score. When you have 1 or 2 guys, it's easy to take away from that, So I think that's something that we focus on, and Coach Channing does a great job with the offense and making sure we buy into team lacrosse, whether it's playing good offense when we're struggling on defense, or holding the ball on offense to give our defense a rest, right? That's a big part of our focus.
I know it's hard to say when you have a game tomorrow and it's probably not the center of your focus before a game on Saturday, but if you had to say, where do you think the game will be won or lost on both sides?
I'm going to be completely honest. I haven't watched really any Syracuse film yet. We'll save that for Wednesday night. Obviously, just looking at the stats and the box score, I mean, the face-off game is going to be a battle. They're facing off at 60%. We're at about 60 or so percent there as well. So I think that's going to be a big one. Who has the ball? The clearing game, kind of seeing some of the stats from their Hopkins game is going to be a big one. Seeing how we didn't clear the ball particularly well against Brown is obviously a big part of it. But, at the end of the day, these big games, I mean, there's going to be a really good crowd here. So it's going to be an emotional game for us to be able to kind of fight through the highs and lows and try and kind of stay consistent to make the next positive play. And I think that part's going to be interesting to see who can do that successfully.
Well, we certainly look forward to it. Syracuse and Stony Brook get underway on Saturday at 3 p.m. face-off. Make sure you tune in. WAER's got you covered with GZA Countdown to face-off at 2:30 on Saturday afternoon. That's going to do it for this episode of the Ostrom Avenue podcast with Ethan Frank and Stony Brook head coach Anthony Gilardi. I'm Johnny Gadamowitz. Be sure, check us out on YouTube. We post all our video interviews there. We're also wherever you get your podcast, Apple Music, Spotify. Be sure to leave a like, subscription, comment, whatever you want to do. We love the interaction. You can also follow us on Twitter at Ostrom Avenue Pod, where we'll be live tweeting every Syracuse Lax game the rest of the way. But Syracuse and Stony Brook this Saturday, I know we're certainly excited, and a big thanks to Coach Anthony Gilardi, as always, for taking a few minutes here. Coach, really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
We'll talk again soon.